Hello, everybody. We're live. I'm here with John, and we have been speaking for a long time about doing the readings for looking at the charts. And then I have never done this before live, but there's something with you, John, that I always feel like, we have so conversation that feels so rich. So I just wanted to kind of do it live and have people join into our conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. It's really fun.
So maybe tell us a little bit about you, just a little bit of background, what you do, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do I put this in a short sentence or two? I started my spiritual awakening back in 2006 and have been on ever since then developing my own personal process of authentic expression into the world. And as part of that, I developed a variety of methods for being able to more effectively resonate with our own inner truth and how to eliminate the obstacles that come up along the process of going through our lives that stop us from being able to express that authentic truth. So in 2014, I had a massive paradigm shift in my awareness, my consciousness, that I experienced as a shift into heart perception, where my heart ceased to be an emotional experience and it became a love experience. I know that usually when we think about love, we associate all these positive emotions with it. And sometimes we think about love and have all these negative emotions that we associate with it, particularly if our object of love is torn away from us. But in my experience, the emotional side of it is a separate aspect of our consciousness. And so I'm really focused on amplifying the expression of heart perception in the world. And that's kind of where my focus is as far as the work that I do and where I want to be. So I think that describes it a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe just tell us a little bit, like, do you work with groups, but you also work one-to-one, just so we understand kind of like what is daily life?
Yeah. So one of the methods, there's a few different modalities that I use, and I work with groups and one-on-one with people depending on their needs. One of the primary ways that I assist people with moving into more resonance with a higher frequency expression is through healing transmissions. So I do remote healing using specific sound and light codes that allow a person's spiritual anatomy to move into more resonant functionality with the essence that they are. So if there are limiting belief patterns, if there are traumas from experiences, whether it's current life, past life, all across time and dimension, I work with people through that methodology. I also teach people to their own experience of energy so that they can begin to work with and become sovereign over their own energetic experience so that they don't need a healer to help them to be in resonance with their inner truth. So I do that in multiple ways.
It's so interesting because I did one of your meditations a couple of weeks ago, and last week we went into the transit of authority. and valor. And I remember, because when I speak to you like this, I feel your energy, and it's conversation. So it's different because we're, interacting. But when I was listening to your meditation or your, transmission, I was hearing that authority. And then when we were writing the copy for the 21 last week, it was like, yeah, for me, that is, your voice has authority. And the beautiful thing with your voice is that it's, I'm kind of excited, and you're always like calm and clear. And there's something, I want to see if you have the 21s in your chart, because I can feel that with you. And I think it's a new kind of authority. That's what we're trying to, highlight in that 21. It's not an authority that controls. It's not an authority that pushes. It's an authority that wants you, you want to listen to it. You want to tap into it because you can feel that there's valor, that there is something, a higher intent behind it.
Yeah. Thanks for that reflection. That was that particular meditation that you were there for. I remember feeling. I just remember feeling the amount of elevation that was available from the energy that was present.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that speaking of authority, when we come up to a gateway or a transit or an experience where the outer world is kind of suggesting to us, hey, we're going to work on this energy now for you. We're all going to be in our own variety of relationship with that specific energy. So I may be in a particular state where I have no authority over my voice, and with the energies going on in the planets or the galaxy or whatever is making that happen, I may go through a round of experiences where that's going to be made pretty clear to me that I feel weak and not powerful, or not having my own authority, or having to give, sort of like give my power to something outside of me. But when the movement into resonance with our true essence, not the personality that we've become through our ego expression, but the essence of soul expression, that is a vibrational octave of the source consciousness that is individuated into each of us, then we're able to have these experiences that are very they're very affirming,
Right.
like where that I personally, I didn't really have much experience around my own authority in what you're describing, but what I expressed into the world carried the resonance that you were able to recognize directly as to what's going on in the rest of the world. And for me, that mostly just feels easy. Like, it feels good. It feels enjoyable. And for me, that's kind of what's exciting about being able to track the movements of what's going on outside of us, because we can begin to interpret our experiences in a way that's very, very clearly aligned with where our own internal expression wants to go, and what we may be needing to shift in order to feel more at ease, feel more relaxed, or feel more just enjoy that process more. So yeah. I was going to say, sorry. I was going to say that in one of our other conversations, a lot of the things, this is not through my own conscious intention or anything. I've just been and this may be something, it may not be something. It's just something that I've noticed, is that when you've expressed with me what's going on, like this week and next week, like we're coming into this initiation period. Well, this week, I just enrolled I enrolled someone into a new course that I'm offering, and they are jumping into their own initiation. in this sort of new experience. So I was just like really surprised when you shared with me what was kind of going on this week and next week. I was like, oh, that's so weird. Like that's exactly what my experience is. Because when someone does something new with me, it's also something new for me. And it asks of me to give something or express something that I haven't done before. So for me, it's also an initiation. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome when that being able to look at what's going on is just like really reflecting back the energies that you're going through. So
Yeah, and that's what with Ashley, who works with me, like this year when we're following the transit, I feel like it has been one of the most kind of accelerated. I would say like I don't even know, like it accelerates awareness and embodiment because we kind of have to live the gates, and we are also coming up with archetypes, and archetypes are all about personification and embodiment. So we get to like, you know, we have friction with the profiles, and we have to write them, we have to draw them, we have to come up with all these things. And there is like I feel like the planetary bodies and our body, you know, there is, of course, otherwise astrology wouldn't even exist. So there's something to, like you say, with that awareness that really ignites your whole, like how your life is unfolding and your understanding about it. So I
yeah,
agree.
and it feels like even if we're looking at these aspects of experience from different perspectives, the goal, if you will, or the idea of what we're doing is so that that awareness can ignite that unique expression to come out.
Yeah.
That's how I end up saying it. You know, I think about expression because that's just part of my background. But everything that you say and share in the group and about the keys and the transits and everything, it always, to me, it's just speaking to the same thing, which is really cool to look at.
Yeah, so my kind of shifting into now your profiles, and I'm wondering, you have a little bit of experience with human design and not so much with the gene keys, or what do you know so far? You know, how much have you actually been into it?
Yeah, so I learned about human design. It's probably been 4 or 5 years now since I learned about it, and I of course wanted to know what type am I and all that kind of stuff. So I looked into it, and I would say because I didn't have any formal training in it, it was sort of like just something I would dabble into from time to time, and I would get little snippets of information about how things work. It took me quite a while to figure out that it was more about the process of um, of energy moving through my individual expression than it was about a definition of like what I do and
Right.
how I do it. That it took me a little while to get that kind of information, and and even longer to kind of begin to sort of draw some of the awareness from the gates and how those function and all of that kind of stuff. So I mean, I would rate myself a beginner in terms of it, but a beginner who has familiarity, where if you start talking about how does energy function through this type of a design, I'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get it. But I certainly, all the numbers in the design, all of the gates and everything, how that works, like I haven't studied any of that stuff. So, I could easily get lost if I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, no, I love
Gene
that.
Gene Keys,
Yeah.
Gene Keys was I learned about maybe a year and a half ago. I want to say maybe 2 years. And I felt that it was like a refinement of what I already understood about human design.
Mhm.
And I really resonated with how the keys appeared to show like a process of consciousness
Mhm.
evolving.
Right.
And that I really resonated with and felt like I was missing in my understanding with human design. Of course, I knew that with design, evolution would happen, but with the kind of like definition of what that pathway looks like, it really added like another dimension to my understanding. So,
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think I'm going to both a little bit. I like that we spoke for 15 minutes because that means that even people watching have a sense of your energy. So that's
mm,
going to also be part of it because then we can see, okay, this makes sense because this and this and this.
yeah.
Uh, and maybe also I thought I was going to show also why human design and the Jinkies are the same, because that's also what some people say, why are you mixing them? And a lot of people in the Jinkies thinks that it's not necessary to do human design, and human design people think that you're portraying raw and the whole foundation. So I kind of like to show that it's the same. And I also want to go back to what we were saying, also the few things I was saying about you, about authority and how that
Mm,
translates in the chart. So
yeah.
let's see. I know it's going to be small, but let's see if we can do this so that we can get your chart. So yeah, so let me just go into the basics. So human design and the Jinkies come from astrology. And it has, you could say that the body graph is the Kabbalah and, those pathways. And I don't know much about the Kabbalah, but I know that it comes from those, from those 10 centers. And then we have the I Ching with all the 64 gates of the Chinese oracle, the 64 hexagrams are laying around the wheel of astrology. So basically for you, you're born in Leo in gate 29, because that's what lays exactly where you're born. And at that point, you had the earth was opposite in Aquarius. So that is your astrology. And what we do is the difference with Jinkies and human design is that we add another activation, which is 3 months before, or 88 degrees backwards in the wheel. So then your sun was in Gemini and in Sagittarius. So this is what becomes the incarnation cross. And that is the basis of human design. As you can already see, it's activating certain 4 different gates inside the body graph.
Right.
And if we go to Jinkies, you're going to see that it's exactly the same cross, 29, 30, 20, and 34. And the way that it's made on this one is that the personality, the moment you are born, is up here and here, the sun and the earth. And on the other side, we have the soul activations, the 3 months before. So basically, it's exactly the same numbers that are mapped out. In the circle, they are mapped out the same. In Jinkies, at the moment, we're only using 11 spheres. So out of 26 activations. So if we go back to human design, what we do is that we add everything. So suddenly you have 26 activations and you have a lot of things in there. So Richard Rad was looking at, especially when he got this, it was so much about Venus and Mars and the emotional part. So the things that he actually was looking at in the beginning, let's see if I can move this. What he was looking at in the beginning were different activations of Venus and Mars, which are the red keys in the hologenetic profile. And then he added some of the blue ones. And there is now, and we have been speaking about this, the Merkaba. So there are three more spheres, one here, and one here. They're going to be added, so this one becomes like a Merkaba with a pearl in the middle. And that's what I'm super excited about. And this has been ready for 4 years, just that it's not in the world yet. So that is something that I'm also wondering, now we are 4/4/2020, like, isn't it time soon, to launch this? So that's something that I feel like, you and I could even do, because it's already done, we could even come on and just do that Merkaba, because it's out there, but it's not launched yet as a program that people can buy. But I totally could add from your human design your sphere of creativity, your sphere of relating, and then your inner masculine. And then we would have that Merkaba. And actually, this is also what you and I have been speaking about, the inner feminine, the inner masculine. That is the very foundation of the Merkaba.
So that's awesome. So if I'm correct, there's 11 points in this profile currently, and you're talking about the addition of 2 more. That would make
3 more.
3 more.
So yeah, so it's creativity, relating, and inner masculine that are going to be added.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Wow, very cool.
So 14, yeah, it could be something with the 13 strands. I don't know, but there is 14. And also though, I know that Richard is speaking about something called the mother sequence. So that would be adding the nodes, adding Neptune, and kind of coming back to the evolution, which is actually the Earth in the moment you were born. There's something with that, what you and I were speaking about too, the embodiment, that process of coming back to Gaia. So yeah. I don't know what that's going to look like, but he has spoken about that sequence. So I feel like what I want to go directly to is that, I said that I was feeling this authority in you, and I was wondering, do you have the 21st gate? And the 21st gate is in the center. You don't have that, and you don't have the 45 that comes from the throat and meets it. However, looking at your chart, you are 6'2". So we call that the role model for the 6th line, and we call it the hermit for the line 2. So that comes from, maybe it's easier to look at it here, 0.6 in life's work and evolution, and 0.2 in purpose and radiance. And that's basically just a decimal. So if you think about it, if we go back to kind of make people understand, it's like when you were born in the 29, you were born on one of these decimals. You were born very much in the end of it. That's what it is, 29.6, and that says a lot. When we, everywhere in the charts where we look at what comes after the point or after the decimal, that speaks about a certain tone. So we can say that all the first line are investigative and creative. All the second lines are like all about flow and ease. And all the third lines are about fire. You can also say it's like elements, the third line is fire and experience. The fourth line is about the heart and sharing. The fifth line is about voice and leadership. And the sixth line is about role modeling and teaching. So that's the very, very fast and condensed way of saying it. So here we know you are the teacher or the role model. That is the 6th line. And then you have this also, the flow in you and the ease and the naturalness. So it's what you do has to be natural for you. Otherwise, you're probably not interested in it.
I get pretty picky about stuff that doesn't do that, right?
Right. And this is the simple, I'm going to read it because it's too small. This is the simple human design thing about your craft. So it says you're here to do things and can find yourself busy at times. And it says you're very dedicated to what you do. And it's also just as important that, it's important that you follow your human design strategy, blah, blah, blah. It's important that you make sure that what keeps you busy is something that you're passionate about. This passion is not just a vague interest, but a passion that flows from the core of your soul. You can find your passion and put it in motion. You will be among, if you can do that, you will be among the most industrious, productive people on the planet. I like that. Does it sound like you? Do you recognize yourself?
Yeah, I mean, when I was 14 years old, I decided that I was going to New York City. I grew up in Iowa, and I wanted to go to New York and become a jazz musician. So that's what I did. I decided the Kennedy coach, and I just put everything I had into that experience of getting to where I wanted to go. So I mean, that at the age of 14, most kids are just trying to figure out how to goof off in class, and I was figuring out how to master an instrument and my ambition was to be able to be a creative improviser that who would, be able to live the rest of my life in this process of exploration and discovery. So, I was pretty busy with that for a long time.
Yeah, and I want to go back to like the business, like telling everybody where it comes from. So let's see.
Mm.
Let's see, how does this work? Stop sharing. This is still the technicalities of what I'm trying to do. Share screen. Here. I'm wondering. I don't know where I put it. So I'll just
Well, hey, everybody. Hopefully Bella is coming back in a second. Or maybe I'm the one who's kicked out. I don't know. Bella's computer crashed. uh, yeah, so the technology things going on these days. So she's probably just rebooting, and hopefully we'll get back up and started with that shortly. Um,
hello.
hey, you made it back. That was fast.
My computer crashed.
Oh dear.
Did you did you find something to share about when I was gone?
It was mostly empty space, so I apologize for the radio faux pas.
Okay.
Anyway, I did let everybody know that your computer crashed. Oh, Ashley says she has the same cross for her life cycle.
Yeah, so this is the thing. So people are born with one thing, and then you've heard about Chiron return and Saturn return and all these things. So Ashley right now, she says that she has that life cycle. So that's the cross of industry, and you know how being busy was part of it. So that is part of that. So that's for you, it's part of that 2034, which is your unconscious. Your soul kind of wants you to be, and it's not really busy. Actually, what it says is that in the moment you are in your flow and your majesty. But in a low frequency, like you're saying, how in the Gene Keys it goes in that process. In the low frequency, you would be all about forcing and all about kind of running around in a self, like some kind of self-centered way.
Chaotic craze.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember there was a period when I was trying to, after I gave up being a professional musician, which I did for a little bit of time when I was much younger. I was trying on different things that I wanted to do, and one of those things that I tried on was wine parties. Like I would have these like enormous wine parties I called Bacchus parties. And it was so everybody could taste all these different types of wines, and there was food and all this stuff. And every time I would do it, you know, it was just like this total crash, sort of a crash and burn, like a computer, you know, in the middle of everything. And it sort of forced me to let go of things that I couldn't control and let my own sort of inner flow just kind of be what it is, you know, and not try and force that flow to be something that it's not. So I feel really that's very familiar for me.
And would you say, as I was asking too, do you find yourself being a busy person, or how would you say that you're a busy person, or would you say, because I feel you're calm as well, so I don't really see you as somebody busy, but would you define yourself as busy, or would you define yourself?
Yeah, I really don't relate to being busy. You know, I have the experience sometimes of having a lot of tasks that need to be done, but my approach or my attitude about it is that I can't do more than I can do. So the tasks are going to be completed when they can be completed, and that's
right.
That it's not really up to me to say, oh, I'm going to cram all of these tasks into this deadline before this deadline. You know, the tasks take the time that they require.
Right.
And I'm just going to go through them in the best possible way that I can and be as efficient as I can with that process. But even when I'm doing that, I don't feel busy because I've already let go of all the tasks that I haven't done yet, because there's nothing I can do about them from where I am anyway, you know? So
yeah, and I love that, because so if we would go into the charts, we see that throat and the pure life. So in this center we have pure life energy. In this center we have expression. So what we are speaking about now is that 2034, the connection you have with your life force and your throat. And this is what makes you a manifesting generator, because we say your pure energy, your pure life force goes right up to your throat. And that makes you a man, like whatever that energy wants to do, it has a direct connection up until the throat, and it can express it right away. It can manifest it right away. And what I feel in your chart is that you can see that 57 that is down here, and maybe you don't see the number, but there's something from this instinctive and intuition center that goes together with this 2034. So intuition is fused into that process. And when you have intuition fused into that process, I would say that it's not about business. It's actually about being intuitive about your own manifestation. And that is also going to look very individual, because all this is individual circuitry. So maybe on the outside could look to people like you're busy with something, but actually I think it's on the inside. It's not busy. On the inside, it's just focused. And I remember you have told me, Bella, I can sit down for basically 9 hours and just focus. And I'm wondering if that's part of that being absorbed in the now with like just the life force that is, kind of nurturing you in that focus. Is that something that you relate with?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, being in a spiritual process of evolution. Um, what I'm doing now with my work actually requires a tremendous amount of intuition, and I'm not entirely certain that I manufactured that as like, well, here's what I want to do. I want to use my intuition. Rather, my intuition kind of led me by the process of life experience to make choices that felt better to me. And now so much of my process is about intuition. I mean, like yesterday I was doing essentially DNA. I read morphogenetic templates. So the level of someone's DNA activation throughout their entire 12th dimensional potential. And in order to do that, I'm in a completely intuitive space. I'm receiving energy from an aspect of a person that you can't look at. Like there's nothing to see. It's like completely, in the ether. And I can do that type of work for it feels like an unlimited amount of time because it just, I don't know, it just feels fulfilling.
Right.
Like I'm doing what needs to be done for me, as well as, hopefully that's helping someone else. But yeah, that process, I definitely would agree that it might look like busyness just because I become unavailable for other things, like maybe for a while I become unavailable to respond to texts or emails, or I can't be bothered with like sitting down to a particular meal. Like I definitely will just be like, yeah, no, that's not as important as what I got to do right now. So like, sorry.
I love you say that. Yeah, it's such a good example. Like, and the way that you explain it, because it's the same words that Ra would use, and he would say about the 34 in that sacral center. He would say it's the only asexual sacral gate. So all the gates that have to do with life force, of course, they're creative. They're sexual gates. But the 34 basically, it doesn't have to do with sexuality because either it's available or it's not available, and it's just that. And when it's not available, it's there. It goes about its own thing, and it's more focused and concentrated on that. So that's basically what you're saying. Either you are available or you're focused on something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, sometimes I've had to become aware of this probably the hard way, where the experience of others around me can be that I have withdrawn my attention from them, and that's not an intention that I'm directly holding. I don't have any. I'm not ignoring anybody or doing anything. I'm simply focusing on what is in front of me that I need to focus on, and particularly in a situation where, and I don't know what type of a type design or what this might mean about what they're experiencing, but when I'm relating with someone who wants or needs reassurances from me that the established connection is still present, sometimes I'll trigger that in another person to feel as if I've sort of like flown the coop, right? Because I'm simply focusing on something other than that person. I'm not the type of person who family or significant others is going to like check on them even on even on a daily basis, much less a couple times a day. I'll like just go about what I'm doing, sometimes that hermit like gets in action, and it's like 3 days and I haven't like spoken to anybody, you know. So yeah, I definitely relate with
Remember,
that.
yeah, and remember what I was writing a couple of weeks ago. I was saying, about when somebody like needs you or somebody thinks you're not there for them, and like how I was feeling that's unfair because I sometimes I'm just in that energy. So I have the connection to this splenic center, intuitive center, and the life force in that 3457, and I have it twice. So sometimes it's just like we are immersed in that process, and it's kind of hurtful when somebody takes it personally because it's not personal. Like it's just what we are here to do, and it's the integration circuitry. So that's what makes the human being kind of survive, because when we are going about in that process, that's when that's when mutations happen. That's when new things can come in. And also, if there's something, with that intuition, if something's going on in the world, if it comes to tsunami, probably by being kind of absorbed in that intuition, in that life force, we're gonna know where to go. As the elephants, we're gonna kind of go up on land. So it's here for like the evolution of humanity, but often it's in the world we live in, it's judged as almost like self-centered or something like that.
Yeah, I actually am curious to hear you speak about this a little bit more, because so much of my work centers around the ability to identify and transmute the energetic structures that cause us to experience what people label as a trigger. So when someone responds to us in a particular way that we experience as hurtful, right? And you mentioned that like sometimes, you're going through a process of expressing your own unique design that is completely not personal to somebody else. And yet they take your expression personally and they get mad at you for it. And then as a result of that, we feel hurt by their response, right? And, like, I can talk about this because this is something that did trigger me. Something that I had that experience around, which was if someone accused me of abandoning them by directing my attention somewhere else. And that used to really bother me because that wasn't what I was trying to communicate to the person, first of all. And second of all, I didn't want to be responsible for their experience of me. Like, yes, I'm responsible for my actions. I can look at the person and say, yes, it's true. I was completely like narrowly focused for an entire week and I didn't call you, right? But I'm here for you now, right? And so I'm curious about how you might look at these triggers, because like once I looked at this particular trigger and was able to resolve it entirely, I rarely have the experience of someone being upset with me for the way that I choose to use my attention. It shifted how the outside world responds and how I experience them if they happen to have, if they happen to feel abandoned or left alone or like I'm not paying attention to them, So I'm just curious about how you would say, like, what are those parts of energy doing in terms of the design or the key or, the gate?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
I mean, absolutely. For you that you have, so the integration circuitry is from the throat and it's to the G center and then the sacral center and the spleen. So there are 4 gates, 57, 34, 10, and 20. You have 3 of these. I only have 2. I have them twice, but I only have 2. And I already get this projected on me. So that's one thing. And that's the integration circuitry. Then the other thing that has to do with why we said that you are kind of you have this aura of authority. That is because you have a lot of definition in your body. Like you're open here in your head and your ajna, but in the rest of your vehicle, there is so much definition, is what we call it. So in the definition, in the centers that are colored, the energy comes from you and go out in the world. And that's the direction. It's just direction. And then the head and the ajna, that's when energy gets in and filtered. So when you have all that energy that goes out in the world, you have so much definition yourself. You are kind of here to live out you in those centers. So I have friends that have all the centers defined, and it's very interesting because they don't, it feels like they don't need anybody. And actually, even so, I have one girlfriend who has all the centers, and it's like this is so funny. We were with her in Croatia last year, and we were in a boat trip, and she was at home, and then we came back, and people that came from the boat were like, okay, let's go and eat. And it was me and 3 other girlfriends, and we were staying, the 4 of us together. So we went and eat, and then after like an hour, I get this like message from my friend who was home. She's like, are you back? And we're like, yeah, we're having dinner. And she's like, but I've been kind of waiting for you all day. Why didn't you even call me? And it's like none of the 3 of us had even thought about writing to her, because she feels so full in herself. So it's like you never think that she needs anything, but she is the 4/6, and she's all about the heart. And actually for her, it was a huge thing. And that has happened more times. Like, you feel complete in yourself. That's also why it's why sometimes it's true. That's also why sometimes people feel like you don't need them. And then that kind of gets projected back, and it creates that kind of dynamic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting because that feeling of definition, and why I have the 2 open centers in my head, and what do I need other people for? Like where do I actually need other people? There's when a lot of people start their kind of like spiritual pathway, one of the very first things that people do is they write in a journal, right? Like they write down their thoughts, their feelings, the events that occurred. And a lot of people that I've met and spoken with, they find that a really like a really enriching experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't stand it. Like, it's like, why would I write down a bunch of stuff that I already know?
Mm-hmm.
However, when it comes to sharing with another person, like if there's someone that I can interact with, then it's like I can absorb their ideas. I can absorb their responses to the stuff that I do and say. I can like learn about myself by interacting with someone else. And it's like that experience of reflection for me primarily occurs when I'm with someone else, when I'm working with someone, whether or whether we're having coffee or something like that. It's like that interaction is it's so important for me to be able to process any reflection of myself. If I'm just by myself, it's like a just staring at a wall, a blank wall. I'm like, yep, that's me. It doesn't stimulate any part of me. Like I don't really care.
Yeah.
So funny.
So I have 2 more things with this thing that you were just referring to that I think could have to do with it that I wanted to also show. So another thing is that you have the channel of focus, and it's actually part of what you're here to do, even in the outer world. Like that's part of your genius that we see in your pearl sequence, that it's going to make you take initiative in the outer world and create abundance and prosperity. So that's the 52 that is in the root center, and it goes up again to the life force in the 9. So you have this ability to focus for like long periods of time, and I think that's also part of of what you're saying, the concentration thing, and that when you have that focus, and that it's about stillness and determination. It's like you can sit still and you're determined that you're going to focus on that. And then it's like that's the process in itself. And it's going to, it's going to take the time it takes. You have this perseverance as well when you have the root center defined to do it until it's done. So I think that's also one of the things where other people are going to be like, one, they might not be able to concentrate for that long, and two, they're going to feel kind of left out.
Yeah. So,
and
so if that root center was open, how would you expect that to be different?
Then you could feel the pressure from others. So then, like we say, the pressure to hurry and be done with things. So then let's say that you had, a roommate and you have decided to do something and they would kind of pressure you to get done with your process so that you could hang out with them. And you would feel that pressure and actually often, act on it, because it's you have to filter what they, their needs and their wants. Now, since it's defined, you're kind of more going to be a little bit annoyed, maybe, but you're not gonna obey that energy.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely me. Like, especially when I was a lot younger, I experienced, even though my design says my primary experience is frustration when I'm not like working my energy in the sort of proper flow, my actual primary experience in life was annoyance. I was constantly annoyed and irritated by the way people would interact with me, and it
that's kind of it was, too.
What? That's 60.
I know that's kind of the 60. Like, it's a little there's quite a lot of arrogance in that, but it's kind of funny.
That's what would really get me going, is because people would like, especially when I was young, they would respond to me and think like, God, you're so conceited, or you're so arrogant. And like in my internal perception, like I'm looking at everybody around me as like, if not equal to me, then better than me at whatever it is that whatever I'm looking at. And I couldn't figure out how they could possibly get from me that I thought I was better than them, but I'm certain it was from how frequently I expressed my irritation for choices that they would make,
Right.
like if like in high school, somebody chose to goof off rather than focus on the task that they were involved in, I would be irritated with them, not because I thought I was better than them, but because I thought they were at least as good as me at doing the thing we were doing, and they weren't doing it. They weren't focusing, and I had no idea that was like, that somebody just might not have any interest in being focused, but this really, like, it really describes why I would end up being that way.
Yeah, and this takes me to the last part of what we were saying about the reactions of people around you, because you are an emotional being and you're kind of here to feel emotions and to stir up emotions in others. So, and that are your nodes. So the keywords for this word in the low frequency are conflict and turbulence. So basically the environment that and it's the fifth line, so it's kind of that like leadership, it's kind of a powerful line as well in those activations. So you are here to stir up emotions. You're here to and also like stir up desire. People want a bigger part of you, or this is part of your environment, and that's part of what you're here to do. And even what you're saying, like your opinions, that's also the south one on the other side. So kind of having opinions what people should do or shouldn't do. So it's like it's all part of your makeup and what's here to surround you. So that's also why I think, yeah, you're here to live that, and you're here to experience that, and that is going to create annoyance in you or something. You're going to feel something about it, and then maybe as as your life goes by, you're going to be able to be more aware about it. And then the highest frequency of these two is about compassion and peace. So it's like, okay, at the end of the day, you might accept people for whatever they are focusing or not focusing on, but that's part of there's turbulence, there's conflict, and then there's a refinement of acceptance and embrace, and like also what you say, that's kind of the heart journey anyway. And there's a perfection on the other node. It's like an integrity, and kind of seeing the integrity of all of it.
Yeah, that really describes, I mean, for the last 6 years, I've been really focused on heart perception. I mentioned that's the work that I do. It's like, it's kind of everything to me. And the journey that you just described, from essentially being resistant to another person's expression to moving into a space of compassion, that actually, like, energetically, it takes place through the heart. Like you can't have an experience of compassion if the energy doesn't move through the heart's the like physical energetic heart space.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's just a perfect description of that. And really, really kind of funny how, having this, being able to look at the diagram from this perspective, it really strongly suggests the idea of a very intentional experience prior to birth, or as an aspect of being born.
Right.
Because these aspects of me being irritated, me finding the potential for compassion, me practicing compassion, all of those things have led me to do the things that I'm doing. And,
right.
Without those qualities, I might be, I'd probably be doing something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost as if, like, depending on how I use my energy in relationship to design, it's almost as if, I'm destined to go through a certain process. And yeah, it might one way or another, depending on how I choose to do it. But, on some level or another, there's just like no way that I'm not going to go through this journey.
Right.
And I feel like my life describes that exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then there's even something that also goes back to the kind of authority and you being whole in yourself somehow, is that if we look at channels, you have 7 channels. Like, I have 3 and you have 7 different. It's not even that you have the same twice. You have 7 different channels. So that means that the channel is like when one center is connected to the other. So that's also so many different themes that are always alive in you and that are consistent, because everything that has an activation, it's consistent. It's like I said, the energy from you is consistent out into the world. So and also that thing, having that many, it's like you're kind of turned, like you have those processes turned on, those themes turned on all the time. And it takes kind of a person, like a big person somehow, in order to be able, I guess, to have those fire right and not fire in interference with each other. So that's something that, and I can see there's also something, I mean, I kind of want to wrap up and look at what are more the themes. So a couple of other themes, and maybe we're going to speak about this another time, but there is this theme about whatever message you have to the world, you're going to be able to express it so that people listen. So this is the channel that goes from the intuition center to the will center, the channel of the transmitter. And it says, as long as you have the right people on your fractal with you, and also when you kind of let go of pride and you come into your true artfulness, then whatever you're here to transmit is going to be heard. So, I mean, that is a kind of a powerful channel that you have. Can you feel that? Can you feel like when you are kind of vibrating in a frequency that is true, that people listen? Is that something that you're aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably one of the first vibrational experiences that I focused on when I first started um, on a spiritually focused path was to not understand and recognize my own vibration of internal truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I have discovered that um, that truth is something that is there's a power to it that um, what I perceive as being powerful about it is that it carries the frequency that activates the inner truth of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
even if those truths are not in agreement with each other.
Right.
And because of that reason, when you're talking about the right people, hearing the message or whatever, when the right people are there, I notice that things that I might perceive or expect to be like, okay, that's just the way that I look at things, and that's it. Like, there's no reason to share that. Um, if if the expression is kind of like asked for by the situation, then that truth like lands like in someone else's experience, like really like, it's like eye opening.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience for me, it's kind of like it gives me the knowing that I'm like responding to my environment in the most appropriate way. you know if i'm if I'm sharing things or expressing things that just isn't landing for someone, I know that I'm somehow not in like vibrational resonance with what's going on around me,
Right.
and I may need to shift closer to that internal truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's like, yeah, that's huge for me.
I love that. And I'm not going to go into it, but like when I look at your vocation, it is about role modeling. Where is it? Is it here? Yeah, role modeling, inner guidance, inner truth. And it's like you just have to be that. A sixth sign is a role model. And then the word is inner guidance. So it's almost like you say, you kind of just have to be it yourself. And then whatever is in your aura, whatever resonates with that is going to be able to tap into that. And that's part of, what fuels your life or what fuels what you're here to do. So it's connected. This is when after 1 hour, where human design starts to kind of flip into the processes of the hologenetic profile. So that's so cool that that you're making that connection.
Well, it feels pretty good.
Yeah, so I feel depth is one other keyword, and your own rhythms. It's another theme. So following your own rhythm, and that's also a tantric channel. So I think that's part of what I also wanted to speak about maybe next time. That has to do with the tantric sexuality, which is the sixth sign of the sexuality. It has to do with wanting to seeing that the creativity of sexuality is something that is on a purely like animal body level, and a heart level, and also on a creator level. So that's something that I can kind of see both in this tantric connection between life force and our truth, our direction, our what love is, and also when we look in the hologenetic profile, let's see where it is, in the innocence of the sixth line attraction. So, and that's something I almost feel like with Ashley, maybe we could speak about it, because we all have this sixth line in the attraction. That's something I would like to speak about, the connection between the sacral center and the G center, and what it is to be a sixth line, like kind of the sexuality of the future, or the intimacy of the future, or how we attract relationships to us, and how that's going to look in in a role modeling sense. Yeah, so I feel, and also it's connected for you to this channel of mating, which we kind of, there are different names of it. That's kind of the most basic name, right? Mating, it's kind of all about attraction and merging. And it can be on a low level, in a low frequency or high frequency. And as the emotional center is mutating right now, that is going to start to look different. And it's all, the new frequencies are all about intimacy, transparency, and something that is much more than just mating. It's about something completely different. So I'm wondering, if you would be interested maybe in kind of making that its own conversation at some point in the near future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the whole idea around pretty much everything I do can in one way or another be related to relationship, and how, whether it's to self or to another, and accessing the sexual energy that's present as a force of authentic expression, rather than something that is perceived or experienced as something that needs to be kept separate, something that needs to be kept behind closed doors, for instance. Mm-hmm. It's pretty, from my perspective, it's pretty impossible to hide the sexual energy that's present or that is not present in someone's expression of their own energy. So I mean, it's for me, it's a huge piece of what I'm looking at in general, what I'm working on personally. So yeah, that would be a great conversation to have, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other last word? Yeah. What?
Yeah, I was just curious if you mentioned I have 7 of the connections between the in the design, and the sacral, it is connected to, like, I mean, the interconnections, there's a lot, right? And I was curious if there's any, if those connections, like if we imagined water from one reservoir flowing into another, mm-hmm. into the sacral, there would be water flowing in there from these other areas, and then it would continue on up throughout the rest of the design. Is there connection between multiple connections of that type?
I mean, it's interesting that you're saying that, because you have something that we call, and it says here, single definition. So for you have all your centers are connected to each other. So there is a constant, flow between your whole being is connected all the time, and there can be flow anywhere. So you don't have to think about connecting parts. For me, for example, I'm a generator too, but I'm not a manifesting generator, because my throat and my G, so my brown center and my yellow centers, they are their own island. And then I have the 3 centers here on the bottom that are connected. So for me, it's extremely important to function as a generator first. And then I have the superpower of the throat and the G. In your case, you don't really have to, you have to think about it that you're a manifesting generator first and foremost, but it's not really like a split for you. So I've never had anybody in all these years that ever asked me about that. So interesting that a single definition would ask that, because it's like you already inherently know that there is a flow that is supposed to happen and that is happening. So you're highlighting that, so we know that even when we're split definition, that's where we need to go in order to function. It's such a good question.
Well, and for me to hear your response, like, I don't have the awareness that someone wouldn't be that way. Like, I don't have the awareness of what it's like to not have those connections running between every center.
Right.
So for me, it's my impression that most people don't have that. So for me, understanding other people and where they're coming from, like, it's really helpful for me to understand what that contrast actually is, and to understand that it is a contrast, that
Yes.
I can't necessarily expect every single person around me to jump from their sacral to their root, back to the sacral and then up to their expression, and, be able to access all this stuff like the second that I want it from them, or the second that they have an opportunity to express themselves in that way. I may be perceiving something that just isn't part of their reality. And if I don't have an awareness of that, then the likelihood for me to treat someone with those levels of like irritation, disdainfulness, all of those sort of like shadowy elements of the 6-2, like that's the stuff that comes out.
Right.
And I want to be in that compassionate place. So it's like really helpful to be able to have this sort of, direct understanding from this diagrammatic way of looking at it, of how things work, and just say like, well, yeah, some people's expression, it's just an island onto itself. You can't you can't expect someone to speak from their emotional center necessarily, even if they're both obviously pretty active in each place. So,
yeah, and also the other thing about, having the energy for something and knowing how to manifest it. For you, it's almost direct. That's what can look like busyness, because as soon as you have a yes for something in determination, it's like you can initiate it. But for most people, or for so many people, it's like they have the idea, they have the energy for it, but it's not a direct manifestation. So and I think that's part of where we go in also to as humanity. It's like, I feel like 5D is kind of you decrete it and then it happens, but that's something new. So if we think about what's been so far, that is really the struggle for most people. And like you say, you haven't really experienced that, because when you were 14, you were determined about something and you made it happen. So that's where the 6th line has to be like a little bit more humble in trying to think that everybody has that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love the conversation around it. So it's not only numbers and lines, like just the fact that you could share so many experience around it. That's what makes it alive. The mechanics are amazing, but they're even more amazing when we see how they actually, are lived out in a human vehicle.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really helpful to have your perspective about how those things really function to give that context. I mean, to me, context is so like it opens so many doors of understanding when there's a context that makes an experience digestible, that makes experience understandable. It's like suddenly the true range of possibilities comes into view, instead of just being, feeling stuck, or, that context is so helpful. And it's really one of the things that I really appreciate about design and the gene keys, especially kind of looking at them together. Like it adds those additional dimensions of context that I think is, for me, you were saying like, okay, well, here's 7 lines that are connecting the different areas. Like, I've generally experienced that as sort of having lots of layers. And in order to kind of be able to process all of that going on, it really helps to have a context to understand it with that has lots of layers. So it's really great.
Yeah, and a couple of words about the openness too. That your head and asana, they're open. There is so much definition down here, but also the openness make you like me. You're like, oh, let's synthesize. Let's not be fixed about how it's supposed to be. So it's also beautiful that you have that open filter. That is the way that you conceptualize things. So that's I think also why you and I can brainstorm together and can I see you said you say something, I just said something, you were feeling or thinking the same thing, but you would have explained it in another way. And that's when the open head and asana, which is the same thing I have with Ashley. When we are, and some people that have defined head and asana get extremely tired because for them it's just like a million ideas. And the synthesis of it is not what they really are interested in. That's like a little example about the openness, right? How that's also beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to quickly share a little story that from, in 2014 when I kind of what I described my awakening experience, where everything just changed. For me, I immediately related to a process of sharing that with another person by delivering the full spiritual mechanics behind what produces that result. And for me, that information was really stimulating and like really got me to where I needed to go in order to take the next step forward. And so I got really excited about, wow, I think I found my purpose. Like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to describe 15-dimensional physics and like all this kind of stuff. And the first few times that I shared some of this information, I could get through a certain portion of it, and then I would start to see people's eyes glaze over, where they would just kind of be like, okay. And the whole purpose of sharing it from my perspective was like, look what we can do. Look what's possible. Look what happens when your whole paradigm shifts through into heart perception. By the time I got to the punchline, everybody was so like exhausted from the whole just like of information. They had no more room for it. And it really, like, I had to really go through a long process of being able to go, oh, that's not how people function. Like most people they don't have space for all that stuff. All that stuff doesn't make them excited. It makes me excited.
Yeah.
So,
I can see that so much. And I relate, and I'm sure Ashley is going to relate to it too, because that's a lot of where we work too. And yeah, it's just different ways of processing things, and to be aware, like you were saying before. For me, it's normal to the more the better. Like the more things to play with, the better. But that's not always the case.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the games that I've played with myself throughout my entire life is how can I make this more complex? It's just like, oh, let's make this a little more intense. So, it's funny. It's good to laugh at, I think.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for today. Thank you for sharing so much about yourself and for letting us, looking into the window of your mechanics.
Well, thanks for going over it with me. It really illuminated a lot of things for me that that I'm always working with every day. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.